Let's take a look at this major update from the FDA. Today, we limited the authorized use of the Janssen COVID-19 vaccine to those 18 and over for whom other authorized approved vaccines are not accessible or clinically appropriate, and to those who elect Janssen because they would otherwise not receive a COVID vaccine. So that last part's particularly interesting. But the news is that it's over the blood clot risk. U.S. restricts use of Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine over rare blood clot risk. The FDA said the shot should be given only to those who request it or cannot receive other vaccines, and you have to be 18 and older. My understanding is that the data on this is not, I don't think it's new, that we've known about the risk of blood clots for some time. It was actually taken off the market for some time. So I'm wondering if, I suppose my issue initially that we can jump into here, how many people should have gotten this FDA warning some time ago if we knew about the blood clot risk?
Yeah, I mean, well, if this is something we knew about, everyone should have been able to know. They should have been able to make an informed decision about what they were putting in their body and the risk it posed to them. Because this information was kept from us, because we couldn't really accelerate the dialogue around the vaccines in order to get the best information about it, because anyone who contradicted the narrative was told that they were not trusting the science, there are serious consequences.
Yeah, and
we're talking about human lives here.
Right. It's if in a society, in an ideal society, immediately everyone should know if there's a problem like this. But in hypersensitive, censorious areas, you can't. That's the big problem with censorship. Like, not censorship in general, but just like misappropriated censorship or over censor. What are you gonna?
So I was gonna say the establishment likes to do this retroactive fact checking thing, where let's say today a man gets in a rocket ship and flies off, and he screams, "I'm going to the moon," and we're like, "Oh wow, that was crazy." And then we come on this show and we say, "Did you hear the story about that guy who got in the rocket ship and yelled he was going to the moon? That crazy?" A week later, the news comes out he actually went to Mars. And what they'll do is they'll say, "Fact check false." Will get flagged, and they'll write stories saying they spread disinformation about the man in the rocket ship who was actually going to Mars. So what happens is we can come out and talk about lab leak, for instance, in COVID. And we'll say, based on the current contextual information, our best assessment is this. A week later, the news changes. The fact checkers then take your old story and call you fake news based on information that came out a week later. Mm-hmm. You see the game? Let me show you.
That's not what happens to Fauci, though, ever.
Oh, right.
No, but they hid a lot of this information too. We knew about the blood clots. We knew about, especially with women, they were having issues with their menstrual cycles, and they covered it up. And all the headlines were, "It doesn't affect your period. It doesn't affect your menstrual cycle. The blood clots are."
For the first few months, that was the story. And then a few months later, they're like, "Oh, by the way, women are reporting issues with their menstrual cycles." Take a look at this from Breaking 911. They say, "Strange how the AP's tweet, same exact headline, isn't flagged as misleading." The AP said, U.S. regulators strictly limited who can receive J&J's COVID-19 vaccine due to a rare but serious risk of blood clots. The FDA said the shot should only be given to adults. Okay, so we know that. Now take a look at this photo. Breaking 911. Posting an image. Breaking. FDA restricts J&J COVID-19 vaccine due to blood clot risk. Misleading. Learn why health officials consider COVID-19 vaccine safe for most people. Here's the best part. That misleading tag linked to an April 1st fact check. So old information fact checking a new breaking story.
And it could have been an April Fool's joke for all we know.
Yeah. That's right. How are we supposed to know for sure? Well, right now, if you look at Breaking 911, they've actually removed the misleading flag on it. That's good. But they do give Breaking 911, according to NewsGuard, they give it a fake news. Here's where it gets even better. The headline used by Breaking 911 is identical to the New York Post. Now I know they said the same as the AP. The AP's headline was different. It says serious but rare. Theirs doesn't. But the New York Post is identical. That's the problem with censorship. So now we have the story coming out from Pfizer, this big data dump. And it's actually quite alarming. And the problem is the people working at YouTube right now, the censors, many of them are probably not even in the US. They have no idea. So even this story right now breaking, the FDA has strictly restricted the J&J vaccine. We run the risk of getting banned because YouTube censors are looking at they got like a laminated placard and it says when to ban someone. They're like, if they talk bad about vaccines, you got to ban them. well, they are. I guess I do.
Yeah, probably more specific. They have a Slack channel where they send it out, this article, and they're like, is this bannable? They're like, well, no, it's got this. But if, and then they cross-reference it with like, if they do it in this context, yeah. If it's in this context, no.
No.
And then they have to make individual decisions.
These are outsourced. These are outsourced. The people who are doing the banning, many of them aren't in this country, not on Slack channels. And I think the fact that we're looking at Twitter, this is why I'm making the point. Twitter censored Breaking 911 due to month-old information. It's a news story. That goes to show you the people who are flagging it are not communicating on what this news is.
But they're not doing it for peanuts either. It's always in the best interest of these bigwigs, like the Hunter Biden story. That was the most egregious of all. But the Hunter Biden story, they're protecting big pharma. It's all of these things. It's not peanuts that they're going after. But that's why we need the open source algorithm. That's why it's so important, and what Elon's doing is incredible.
I will say, to Ian's point, freeing the code, the one thing that we absolutely need to do is free the algorithm, the recommendation. All of that stuff needs to be open source. I don't think these companies should be allowed to hide that, because what do they do behind the scenes? They lie to Congress about censorship, manipulation. There was a really great question from a Republican. I can't remember who they asked. They said, why is it that when you sign up for Twitter, you are shown nothing but Democrats to follow?
Really?
Yep. If you are in Washington, D.C. and you sign up for Twitter on a brand new computer, it gives you all Democrats. And they were like, that must be an oversight on our part. Free the code.
Till last Tuesday, yeah.
Exactly. Release the code and let us know if you're lying or not. Because it's one thing, we had this discussion the other night about whether all of the code should be released. Well, the infrastructure that holds the building up, I disagree with Ian on. But in terms of how they're manipulating what we see and what we think, you shouldn't be allowed to do that.
A lot of people messaged me about security through obfuscation, which is part of keeping your security code private. And they said that's been completely obliterated and is useless. You need to open source the security code too, so it can be poked and prodded and then resolved and made stronger. But when you say free the code, you got to be specific. You need to make these things become interoperable. And I agree that you need algorithm observation.
I'm saying specifically for now, where I would agree on releasing the code to the public is Elon Musk says when he gets Twitter, he wants to make the algorithm open source. And he should. That way everybody knows that they're not manipulating politics.
I think they're already doing cleanup, though. I don't think they want us to know. And we saw that the unthrottling of so many accounts. I was like, wow, all of a sudden I have all these things.
I gained like 200,000 followers in a few days. It's crazy.
I had been, stagnant. I was still gaining, but it was stagnant for the most part. And then all of a sudden it was like the floodgates open up for so many people. But I think they're doing cleanup, and how fast they removed that warning shows it too, that they're a little more cognizant.
Well, I tweeted to Elon. I said, hey, yo, Elon Musk, check this. An old fact check has restricted a new story about the vaccine. It got 1,000 retweets. I'm not saying it was me. I'm saying a bunch of people were tweeting out like crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
Look what's going on.
Yeah, you contributed, for sure. You contributed to that. The one problem with open sourcing the algorithm here and seeing is that it doesn't stop an errant administrator from censoring something in India if they're working remote and they are like, no, we're gonna downvote that. You may be able to track that it happened, but you still don't know who did it and why they did it. That's all like business talk. Now you're saying, do we have to open up their Slack channels so we can watch them communicate? And that's like basically the beginning of the end of the corporation. If you're gonna, but is that also justified?
Let's talk about that, man. I'd be willing to bet a large sum of money that if you took Twitter's internal Slack channels, which is their internal communication between employees,
assuming it's Slack or some other program,
whatever they're using. Yeah, I don't want to drag Slack. Slack's a great company, but if they're using some kind of messaging service, and you got to see the full archive. There's going to be tons of people saying, can we ban the conservatives? How do we get these people off the channels? And we know this is not opinion because Project Veritas has already released videos where you have employees of these big tech companies saying, we tried to get them banned. We tried to get them removed.
That was Media Matters. That was Media Matters who was bragging about getting Project Veritas and James O'Keefe ripped off.
That reference I was giving was actually, I think, an employee from one of these companies saying that inside the company, we are trying to get them banned. But yes, you are correct. They also got Media Matters bragging about getting.
And I tweeted it out for them. I had never been mentioned by Media Matters that I know of. And I tweeted it out and I was making fun of that. Whoever was in the video. All of a sudden, I was mentioned in a Media Matters article for nothing, for my children's book, after I made fun of him.
Yeah, Media Matters is an interesting organization. We've had a couple conversations about them. And it's funny because you two are going back and forth about these different examples of the left basically being caught trying to suppress right-wing content, even though they claim that's something that isn't really happening. Isn't it interesting how the stories that conservatives promote about how our side is being maligned or unfairly treated are actually true? In literally every single instance of the left upholding its persecution narrative with the story of some kind of hate crime is completely nonsensical and turns out to be untrue when you look into it just a little bit.
I just want to shout out that Gizmodo article. It's the best example of this. Former Facebook workers routinely suppressed conservative news outlets. This is what kicked off the whole story about censorship. And I see that. And it's 2016. I think I'm working for Fusion at the time. And I was like, hey, look at this news that I know and trust. Wow, they were censoring conservatives. Then I come out and I say that it's happening and I get called a liar or right wing for saying it.
Facebook's weird, though, because then they were giving a lot of money to Targeted Victory, right? And that was a Republican group to make things against TikTok as a competitor. So they're weird. They'll do things like that, but then they'll now they give money to conservatives, and so they're still censoring them. But it's just such a weird relationship because Facebook, I feel like, is different because they just do whatever for the money, whereas I feel like Twitter is a little more beholden to the mob. But you're seeing how fast they clean this up. It took them how long for the Hunter Biden story, and this disclaimer's gone within what, a day?
I think it's really fascinating. Didn't Fauci say we're out of the pandemic or something like that?
I didn't hear it.
I did not hear anything like that. I didn't even know. I didn't even know Fauci still existed.
Well, maybe you should pay attention to the Fauci news.
I thought he vanished. Would you go to www.fauci.com? What are you talking about?
Well, you can't get into another pandemic until you get out of the old one, right?
That's a good
now
point.
we got the chicken thing happening.
I think Bill Gates was like, when we get into the next pandemic, he's getting everybody fearful about the next one already.
He's like, we're releasing an update.
There's the chicken flu now that they're freaking out about.
But you brought
Wasn't
up
that already a thing? Bird flu?
No, but it's like jump to
It's a new one.
Jump to a person.
I kind of felt like I derailed your comment about Fauci. Was there something you were gonna?
Yeah, that he said something about we're out of the pandemic already. I saw something like that, and I'm just wondering, Myth Informed posted that clip of the Joe Rogan podcast where I asked Vijaya Gadde, would they ban someone for vaccine misinformation, and she says no, it's not against our policies. And sure, if they went and did it. So their policies changed because the pandemic happened. Now the pandemic's over. Is there the same level of risk?
Yeah, this is from WashingtonPost.com. If Fauci says U.S. is out of coronavirus, quote, pandemic phase.
Well, there you go.
That's from Fauci. That's from the science. And I say that as a joke. He is not the science.
So does Twitter now give up its emergency powers and stops banning people for these things because it's no longer a greater risk?
No, absolutely. I mean, when does any organization, government or otherwise, take power from the public because of some kind of emergency and then give it back once the emergency is over?
I mean, what's this? WebMD says Fauci clarifies out of the pandemic phase.
He said, wait, I need another time cover.
What are they saying here? He said, we don't have 900,000 new infections a day. We are at a low level now. So if you're asking, are we out of the pandemic phase? We are. Okay. So, all right. Pandemic phase is over. So do we all move on? Is that it? Or
yeah.
Well, it's over till they don't want it to be over anymore. This is part of what's so frustrating about this entire thing. They can flip the narrative in a second and then they say, oh, the science changes. And that would be all well and good if they were allowing any dissident who tried to provide the public data that didn't support their narrative a voice, right? But they silence everybody. And if the science is always changing, then that's all the more reason to allow people to speak out when they have a perspective that conflicts with the current narrative, because the current narrative could always turn out to be untrue, but they want to have it both ways. The science is settled. It's unchanging. Shut up and listen to us. We were wrong. Oh, well, science is a process. It evolves over time.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast. And there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and we'll see you all there.